So let us properly introduce her. Lelia here has worked for 13 years with Korn Ferry International in its global industrial and consumer practices. She later served King Cannon and Reed, a global recruitment firm, as its managing partner, Asia Pacific, and board member USA.
She have also been serving as a C-suite searches across Asia Pacific since 1997, and she's the founder for the Lim Lodges and Master. We're really excited to hear about the Lilia insight into job markets given her impressive experience.
Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to add that I did have a corporate career before I joined the recruitment function. And I think that really helped me in terms of understanding functions out there, which later on, when I had conversations with the C-suite candidates that I had, it was much easier. It gave me confidence in being able to engage them. Because at the end of the day, you certainly don't want to be intimidated by a CEO that you're interviewing. Rather, you'd want to extricate enough information from that CEO in order to write a proper report or an assessment of him before you propose him as a candidate. So I think it was very important for me to have that corporate background before I moved into search. And I do agree. My experiences have been a bit of everything. And that's also something I want to encourage today, that you should not have any fear in trying things out, but learning from them and being able to apply them at some point in your career. So just to give you a sense, I graduated as a lawyer, but I never practiced. Instead, that the discipline from being a lawyer helped me in the functions I undertook later on. I joined British Petroleum as my first job, and I went on to work in the marine division of British Petroleum. So there I was climbing in and out of tankers, bunkers. I was in the ocean. I was selling marine lubricants. It was far from the world I studied from. I studied in, right? And then, of course, from British Petroleum, I went on to join an agribusiness, and this time in a corporate function. And in that agribusiness, I was exposed to plantations. I was exposed to a whole host of different experiences. And in a corporate function, I was very much in a legal and human resources role. So by the time Korn Ferry talked to me to become a recruiter, I had been in a sales function, I had been in a corporate function, and then in moving to Korn Ferry, I became a business development and commercial person because we were there and we had to work with clients. We had to look for clients out there in order to build a whole portfolio in which then we would run searches. So I do want to encourage that learning comes in many, many forms, and you do not have to have one career track for your entire life. Anyway, so here goes. If we could have that next slide, it just gives you, this is me. That picture was taken years ago. I am very fond of it. And I do need to get another one, yes. So this is me, and that's a bit about my background. You can take your time to read it. I had just summarized it just now, only to encourage you, all right? Next slide, please. So today, I'm really excited to share with you and to have this discussion on careers, because for me, the young talent out there, and it's so exciting, and the world is very exciting post-COVID. I do admit that things have changed a lot, but as we all navigate these changes together, we learn so much from each other. So mentoring and reverse mentoring, become one almost seamless in many organizations nowadays. So the three things I want to share today is about, what's in and what's not, what is the reality today, just to give you a moment in time. We understand, of course, things are in evolution. You all know that there is suddenly a war happening out there, several wars happening out there. But, a lot of these things are beyond our control. Let's not get distracted by them. Secondly, I want to talk about what the competitive landscape is like, and then being able to stand out as a new applicant or as someone who's trying to build their careers, someone who, who feels that they need to get their experience in order to get noticed. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And then hopefully I leave you with some practical tips on interviews. And that's just to get that, after you get your foot in the door, what happens at that next stage? What are some of the typical questions that you're going to be faced with? And I'm happy to take questions after that. All right. Or after, whenever Xian tells me I can do question and answers, I'm happy to do that. So who wants a job for starters? Let's move on to the next page. Now, Hong Kong and Asia are somewhat standalone. I do believe that, with all of you having graduated from Asia Pacific, you've seen that this has been an exciting time, since COVID. And I do believe COVID's brought us to a period of transition. We are now talking aggressively about AI. We are now talking aggressively about geopolitics coming into play. We are now talking aggressively about how the multi-markets start to work with each other, but within the region and not necessarily internationally anymore. So things have changed. In Hong Kong, I do believe there is some cautious optimism. And we have seen how, China is managing its economy very aggressively. We are seeing some lights at the end of the tunnel in Hong Kong. So there is a moderate recovery from a drop that we saw in 2024 and 2025. Post-COVID was quite traumatic for all of us. And I do know some of us even had to graduate during COVID, and that wasn't pleasant at all. But yeah, there is some sentiment to increase hiring in 2026. Now, the reason why I do want to bring this up is that a lot of companies and organizations post-COVID did have to, almost refit themselves. They weren't meeting targets. There was certainly some definitely pressures on cash flow. And with that also with the whole global geopolitics in play, relationships were not helpful, and therefore business was not coming our way. Asia saw a fall in M&A exercises, programs, initiatives, and it shows you how much investments were coming into this part of the world. It did slow down quite a lot. But with that, like I said, there are some good signs that are beginning to feature themselves at the end of the tunnel. Good signs around how innovation has come back in a big way, how productivity is a main driver now, and how training and education is even more critical in this environment. Not necessarily just having degrees, and I know that 12 million Chinese students graduate every year, but how do they apply themselves in this new environment? I think that's that's the sticking point. And of course, employers, because of this short-term mentality, are under great pressure to start delivering immediately. And that puts pressure on candidates that they hire. They need people who can contribute immediately. And so therefore, we encourage you to take on internships. We do encourage you to take on a variety of work experiences so that you can apply yourself. Top industries. So technology and digital, I think we've seen that. There's a high demand out there for specialists in AI, specialists in data mining, specialists in cybersecurity. Construction, I added this in as an additional because I've been having chats with a few construction companies recently, big ones, and the government has been trying to push through infrastructure projects involving the PPP, private-public partnerships. So I think construction will be an exciting play as well, and infrastructure will continue to see investments by not just Hong Kong, but also across Asia. And this is, countries trying to make sure that their people are employed. Banking and finance, this continues to be very exciting. I am really excited about banking and finance right now, not because of the hype around cryptocurrency, but we are at that pivotal moment right now where currencies are being looked at as as different mediums of communication now. So transactions, and recently I've heard this term called atomic DVP. So it sounds like English, doesn't it? But it means atomic delivery versus payments. And what that means is simultaneous delivery versus a payment for a service, an asset. And that comes with knowledge of your blockchain. That comes with knowledge that your money is secure. That comes with knowledge that money flows seamlessly. So stable coins is a huge discussion right now. And I know Hong Kong in this part of the world is pioneering a lot of developments in the financial world to stabilize, to provide the right regulatory environment for new currencies to come into play. So banking and finance, and definitely other than fintech, private banking continues to be very interesting. So, individual and private individuals who are always looking for higher returns are no longer trusting institutions necessarily and turning to their private bankers for advice. And then, of course, compliance. We're back to, I think, looking at a more regulated environment, especially in these times. Healthcare and life sciences. Now, we continue to see that this is an important sector to invest in ever since COVID happened. But not only that, we're really talking about regeneration. If I'm female, so I am aware of some of all that lunchtime technology that comes on board. But I can tell you, I think healthcare has taken one step forward in recognizing that people are living longer, we're not just feeding vanity in the next generation, we're also having to look after an aging population. An aging population cannot afford to drain the resources of its economy by being sick all the time. It's as simple as that. So healthcare is becoming an important area where investments are going in to ensure that we're all moving towards well-being rather than just treating the sick. Logistics and supply chain, we know that that's under tremendous pressure right now. I'm sure you've heard enough of what's happening at the Straits of Hormuz. But not only that, it is now facing pressures around increasing costs. So automation is big now. Being able to manage data is very big now. So logistics and supply chain continues to be very exciting. And of course, hospitality and service. I know that pressure still in terms of costs, but nonetheless, it is an area where it's evolving. Hospitality is not just a real estate play anymore. It's really about high-end service and what that looks like. So anyway, next slide, please. I do want to talk a little bit about this only because I wish for you to understand where the growth and the demand is coming from. So in technology and digital, we see that the high demand is due to digital transformation. I know this has been happening for some time now, and companies are seeing the need to invest, not necessarily in AI to manage costs, but to really invest in their entire supply chain to ease friction and also to ease pressures around unforeseen circumstances like what we see today in a war situation. Banking, finance, recovery in IPOs and financial innovation. So I hope, and I'm glad to hear this, that we're not looking at raising funds purely just from M&A play, but that IPOs could come back again. But yeah, so financial innovation, we are talking about fintech here, so that's the exciting bits I've mentioned before. Healthcare and life sciences, the growth is driven really by biotech investments. And I think there's a strong belief that we will all live to 100. We need to help ourselves a little bit in advance. Logistics, tech-driven optimization. So if you've been in China, you've seen how drones are used increasingly to deliver products. You also see mini drones where they can even lift a human being. So, new technology like that is coming in order to drive optimization. And hospitality is I'm sure you've been to the airports, there's a rebound in tourism, and even more so with these wars, there's going to be a larger rebound within Asia Pacific itself. All right, next slide, please. This is to give you a larger picture of what's happening in Asia. I'm hoping that someone can enlarge the screen a little bit so that we get some insights on what's happening. Now, across the multiple countries in Asia, and we know we are not homogeneous in any form or fashion, whether in language or in culture. But nonetheless, there are a few things that are trending. There is a recognition that we are dealing with an aging population. So retirement ages are being pushed even further. We're looking at 60, 65, maybe 67 down the road. I know Singapore's already pushing it to 67. We're looking at recognizing gig economy, and that means protecting the employee, protecting the person who is a contractor for a short tenure. So new regulations are coming in. We're also seeing a lot more focus around ID&E. So this is inclusiveness, diversity, and engagement, equity, sorry. And this is to, to really manage what the workplace could look like. Now that we're working in hybrid fashions, what does that look like? What does it mean to work fairly in that environment if you're not seen at all, right? How do we take proactive steps towards sexual harassment? And it does exist. So we're no longer sweeping it under the carpet, but recognizing this needs to be recognizing this needs to be attended to, especially for markets like Japan, where they hardly speak up. And Australia is looking at family-friendly rights. So a lot of this is recognizing that people want a different work environment having come out of COVID. All right. So if you can take a minute to look at this, I know the team will be sending you this deck of slides anyway. If it's too small, do come back to us. I will try to send you the actual PDF file for you to have a look at. All right. Okay, next slide, please. Now, what's not, and these are some of the challenges we're facing in the workplace. The rise of contracting, flexible contract roles are becoming more common. So the gig economy is on the rise. And I don't knock this because it does breed entrepreneurs. And I do feel that that's also a certain skill set that is to be encouraged, not discouraged in any way. And but flexible contracts are still in many ways still relatively unprotected. And I think, as I've mentioned before, with the new laws coming into place, we could see a little bit more protection around what that means to the individual. We're also looking at a lot more competition. There are a lot more graduates today who are not, perhaps not as hands-on or as practical as employers would like. So I think competition is definitely there. Everyone is fighting for a degree without realizing that the degree is not the only path to success in finding a career. And secondly, I hope that curriculums change in universities and focus a lot more on application and not just concepts. You and I know if you put in a concept or you ask ChatGPT, design, say, a solution for old people in an old folks' home, it will give you lots of concepts and ideas. But being able to apply that is a different thing altogether. And this is where we as human beings need to differentiate. So the internships that you do and the work experience that you gather will be very important. And do, like I said, apply rather than just think about the concepts that you learn. Multi-skilled professionals. So companies are looking for individuals who can combine technical expertise with business acumen. So again, this goes towards what I just said about being able to apply the knowledge that you have and being able to tell yourself that you can be multidisciplinary in any environment. And I'll talk about general skills in another slide. Rising costs, but not rising pay. I think this we face across the board. It's not just for young freshers. I know it is a very tough time, but that's because companies are not generally doing that well. They're just coming out of the COVID environment. They're just coming out of a very new set of dynamics in terms of consumers and regulation nowadays. So yes, revenues have fallen. So living costs and inflation costs are matters that the governments are handling aggressively. And I do hope as well that with this war, the inflation will not rise that much. But yes, I think we need to be aware that these are some of the challenges when you are negotiating for that new job that you want to join. Okay, next slide, please. Now, I want to mention about general degree holders at this point. So let's just talk about my background for a little while here. I'm a lawyer by training. And I would classify that as a general degree, just like business admin is a general degree, all right? In some ways, it teaches you certain disciplines, but if you do not apply it in that very specific function, so you could have done an accounting degree, but if you do not become an accountant, that accounting degree becomes a general skill, right? So this is where and even with other skills like communication, I think we've got a whole host of other general type of degrees where there's no specific profession you can enter. Then do think about how you would like to present your skills in an applicable way. So think of how communication, critical thinking, adaptability could be valuable to that company that you're applying to. So identify transferable skills for yourself. The other is explore broad career paths, So a sales role, for example, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a lawyer to do sales or you have to be an accountant to do sales. So general broad careers that take you into project management, that take you into customer service, that take you into marketing. These are broad careers that you could consider. And of course, whilst the world changes bit by bit and we are being faced by different technology day on day, look at enrolling in short courses that could build your expertise in. So for example, I just talked to a candidate who was an accountant. He became an auditor. He got all the right technical skill sets under his belt. And then he decided that he wanted to move into sustainability. So he then went on to take a course in ESG and built his expertise around that, combining both just combining the knowledge as well as the applicability with clients. And then, of course, seek mentorships, gain guidance and align your degree with career opportunities by reaching out to people who have done so before in their careers and learning from them. All right. I can take questions later if you have any. Now, let's talk a little bit about standing out in a competitive market. So I've just shared with you that in China alone, we're looking at 12 million graduates from universities per year. That's a whole country by itself, if you think about it. So you are, definitely from and this applies to multiple countries across Asia, not just China alone. So we are faced with the preponderance of graduates, and we need to stand out. It is a very competitive market, only because companies are still redefining what their new future could look like, where their new revenues are coming from, where new channels of business could emerge. So I would encourage you to certainly, if you are in any of these countries that I've highlighted here, start looking at the right platforms for jobs. I've mentioned a few here only because they are country specific. And some of them are cross-country specific, cross-country. So Indeed, for example, is a cross-country, right? Indeed has been really quite good if you're looking for short internships. They do take on a lot of temporary roles, and they do offer a lot of temporary roles. And then, of course, there's some government-linked ones. Like in Singapore, there's one called mycareersfuture.sg, which is sponsored by the Ministry of Manpower. It is run by the workforce agency in Singapore. But likewise, this goes towards all the other countries as well. You do have career platforms for jobs out there. Build your network, and we're going to do a little exercise after this, because it is very important to understand how your network can be your first form of referral. And I'm not just talking about mom and dad. We're talking about the larger BXPM alumni. We're talking about the larger workforce from the BXPM alumni. So attend, a lot of these activities. Do attend the career fairs that you see in the specific countries that you're in, and enjoy industry events. You see them being advertised in newspapers sometimes. So, for example, I know that the Business Times, they do talk about the luxury symposium every year that's held. If you're looking at going into consumer goods, see whether you can join some of these symposiums. And some of them do offer very low rates for students and young graduates. So check them out. All right. And develop in-demand skills. So if you find that the world or the industry that you are applying to, is looking at investing more in AI, or you are a gaijin in Japan and you need to be interviewed in Japanese, then do invest in, these skills that's going to help you along the way. All right. Next slide, please. Optimize your profile online. I know LinkedIn is one platform, but I'm sure there are other platforms that you can use in order to optimize your profile. Use a professional photo. Please don't do all this, I don't know, the stuff that you do for fun. I mean, do use a professional photo. And that's very important, because companies need to have a visual of what you could be like in their workplace. So use a professional photo, write a compelling headline about yourself, showcase your skills, your certs, your achievements out there, and engage in industry content. So for example, in LinkedIn, talk about, if there's a particular passion that you like. I talked about just now that person who wanted to move into ESG after being an auditor, and he started engaging himself in talks around the environment and climate change and its impact on business bottom lines. Being able to raise this as content for your page will be important, and from there connect with professionals who have that similar passion. And then showcase your practical skills. It's very important, I think, nowadays as human beings, that we differentiate ourselves from AI, that we differentiate ourselves from ChatGPT. We're not just Wikipedia, a walking Wikipedia. We need to show that we can apply our skills and our knowledge. So, try and get, when you're in an internship, try and get hands-on experience, volunteer, just to get hands-on experience, and then highlight those skills in terms of how you're going to write your competence in your resume. And then, of course, interviews and follow-ups. I know some people forget that, after the interview, they forget what to do next. They just hope and pray that someone will call them and give them a job. But the follow-up is just as important. Follow up with a thank you note, follow up with more engagement, and reach out to employers to express your interest with them. That's very important. Today, you're just going to have to do that much more in order to get yourself visible. All right? Next slide, please. So basically, you've just done an exercise in reinforcing the 3 degrees of influence. And that's a social network theory that proposes that social influence can extend beyond those you've never met and only indirectly tied to. So please support your fellow cohort, all right, our fellow alum. out there. We're moving on now to resume writing, and that's getting you to the top of the pile. All right. Now, I have just, I work with young people sometimes, and then recently I worked with this young man, and I looked at his resume, and I thought, oh no, this is a bit of a disaster. But anyway, if I can suggest, there may be two ways of looking at a resume. One is a company-led resume where you list down the company name and then you list down your experiences in there. And the other is a competency-led resume. Now, if I can get you to just magnify the one that's company-led, then people will understand what I'm talking about. Could you magnify the one on the left? Okay, so basically a company-led resume details the company followed by the activity that you were involved in. The company followed by another activity you were involved in, okay? This is very, very typical of most resumes I see. Almost 80% of resumes come in this format. And the reason it comes in this format is because it's chronological, it's easy, because then you're able to specify the company and then describe the role that you had. The problem is not everybody has impressive companies to list. Not everybody has impressive jobs that they undertook or impressive experiences from that company. So in this case, you will see that most of the companies were quite nondescript. And it's a struggle. Most recruiters, unfortunately, and human resource people will do a couple of things. Number one is they start matching what they need. They're looking for identifiers in that piece of paper, right? The other thing that human resource people do is that they're looking for best practices, training, some form of learning before you come to them. And therefore, they look for certain brands, they look for certain corporates that would give them an indication that you do not need to start from the bottom, for example, right? So that's when a resume like this, because it doesn't have those features that would stand out, it gets chucked, never reaches the top of the pile. All right. Now, alternatively, for a resume that has great credentials, you've been in the right company, you've taken on really interesting projects during your internships or in the first few years of your working life, then, keep it in that company-led format that I've just showed you. But if you find that you've just been a little bit weak in terms of the type of roles you've undertaken, or a little bit weak in the type of companies you've undertaken, then move towards what we call a competency-led resume. All right. And this is a resume that, yes, it gives you information of which companies you've joined, but then if you could just highlight one of the competencies, that would be fantastic. So what happens is then you pick up the skill sets that you want to display. And in this particular case, his number one skill sets was in sales. And he wanted to highlight how in the different companies that he interned with, or he had joined, or he had worked with, that he was able to contribute to that environment. Okay, so this is a competency-led resume. And I'm happy to take questions after this. Can we go to the next slide? Now, to be even more aggressive, you can be very creative in the way you provide your information. So don't forget, a resume outlines your relevant skills and experience. It displays the benefits that you offer in joining the company. It grabs the attention of the employer. It helps match you to the position that they have vacant. And hopefully it leads you to an interview. Okay? So this is a young man who is applying to an advertising job. So he's used this very creative approach. Can we play it?
So that's me. Marc Larouste, half English, half French, born and raised in Fond-de-France. But who cares, right? Well, give me a minute of your time, and I'll try and convince you why you should. I graduated from the University of Kent in the UK with a degree in Business and European Management with Spanish. 3 days later, I joined AFA Press Group, a media and advertising agency, where I worked across 5 continents, interviewing the movers and shakers of the world, and saw my country reports published in world-renowned newspapers. I then decided to start up my own company, providing an online tailoring service for men, and so Mr. Taylor was born. As challenging as it was, I learned a hell of a lot. I eventually joined INSEAD, a leading business school managing programs and advising global leaders. But enough with the boring stuff. You're probably asking yourself, what are a few of my favourite things? Well, apart from sunsets and long walks on the beach, I also happen to enjoy working out, mixed martial arts, golfing, coaching, playing guitar, acting, photography and blogging, traveling, and socializing. So why should you pick me out of 7 billion people living on this planet? Well, as a strong communicator and negotiator who can build effective relationships, I specialize in finding creative and innovative solutions to the toughest problems. I also happen to speak English, French and Spanish, and been involved in some very exciting stuff over the last few years. This might sound a little Miss World, but I truly believe that I can bring a real and positive impact to your organization from day one. I'd love to join a creative agency where I could put my skills and experience to good use and apply my entrepreneurial principles to foster social transformation. If you'd like to find out more, get in touch, download my CV, or simply laugh at my poor writing style, check out my website. Thank you.
Okay, so this showcases an alternative format. Not many of us, and you've seen this video. It took a lot of work in order to come up with this 2-minute kind of resume. So, if you need to, there's no reason why anyone would stop you from creating a resume that appeals to the industry that you're in. All right. If you're moving, now he does it for a specific audience, the agency audience. And number 2, he does it specifically for the UK audience. So you can see this underlying self-deprecating humor that he applies. It's very British. But, in the Japanese environment, for example, it may be very different. You do have very strong creatives in Japan, but the approach would be a little bit more deferential in the way you introduce yourself, in the way you choose the music behind it, for example, right? And that leads me to the next slide, which is on interviews. There's so many formats today on interviews that you need to be aware of. It's not just the face-to-face and face-to-face format, and it's not just a telephone format. It's a whole host of other things, including robotics. Young people have also sat in front of a screen which flashes a question, and you're meant to respond to that question on the screen. I know it's difficult, and these are times where you're going to have to be adaptable, I'm afraid. So be aware of all the different types of interviews. Now, with the CIA and FBI, they have used stress interviews, and they have used puzzle interviews. So this is very common in areas or industries where there's a high level of technicality or even confidentiality involved. All right. What's very common is the career fair interview, the assessment interview, the telephone, even the lunchtime interview, and the small group interview. I think in North Asia, especially Japan and Korea, you have a small group or committee interview, which is very, very common. And some of them interview not just one person, they interview a whole host of candidates who then compete against each other. So be aware of that. And of course, watch your language and tone. in Japan, the way you approach the interview, the way you're dressed, the way you address your interviewer, the way you enter a room, the way you stand next to your chair before you're invited to sit, the way you thank them, the way you bow, all this is very, very relevant. So please get yourself informed before you enter an interview. Get yourself informed, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's a person who has worked in that company before, or it's a friendly referrer. Please get yourself informed. And the tone has to be respectful. I think that's very important. Understand that you are dealing with a different generation from yourself sometimes, or even if it's the same generation, how do you ensure that you're not coming across wrongfully? Right? And when I say wrongfully, I just mean that perhaps you may need to be aware of your appearance. You may need to be aware of the way you speak. You may need to be aware of the way you make eye contact. You may need to be aware of the pitch of your voice. All right. Now I put there, I think you might understand my slide. So in Japan, there's a lot more posturing, a lot more respect and deference provided. Less so in the other countries, and even less so in ASEAN, where it becomes a conversation and an exchange rather than a formality. All right, next slide, please. Now, I like this slide because I think these are the three most common questions you're going to be faced with. And these three questions will turn up in some form or manner during the interview. And I'm just hoping that you can take a minute with me to maybe address some of them. The first one is, tell me about yourself. And basically what the interviewer wants to know is, who are you professionally? What experience and skills do you bring to the table? What are your strengths? And why should we hire you, right? And I always encourage candidates to think about an I can structure. This is an abbreviation, I, the alphabet I, and can, plus. Okay, introduce yourself. I for introducing yourself, right? Summarize it. Say something like, I've just graduated from the University of Waseda in da-da-da-da-da. I'm fresh out of university, but really find myself excited by engineering as my area of focus. Then talk about C, which is your career achievements. Now, if you have no career achievements because you've never worked before, think about what you can bring to the table. Say something like, during my engineering course, I was fascinated by the movement of fluids through space. And, and that's why I'm particularly interested in aerospace engineering right now, because, obviously, as we move towards different forms of liquefied petroleum or aviation fuel, we might need to consider the fluidity of fluids, of liquids. Then A in that structure is for attributes and skills. Describe how you've enjoyed working in a team. Tell them about how you've contributed to a project in that last scientific fair that you attended or presented in, or that particular project that got you an A in university. Talk about what skill sets and attributes you bring to the table. N is for next. What can you bring to this job? And this is where you need to read up on the job description that was shared with you. You need to read up on the company and what their ambitions are. So don't just limit yourself to the vision and mission. Have a look at their press releases to figure out where they're investing in. And then add the plus, which is something personal about yourself. All right? I really enjoyed during my internships at blah, where I was participating in, in the engineering division. And over there, we created, the engineering division was working on the new plane or the new jet that was being launched in August. And I believe that I can contribute similarly in terms of teamwork and my passion for aeronautical science on fluidity, on fluids, to your organization. Close with something personal. All right. Now, I will take questions later, but let's go back again to the second question. What is your greatest weakness? And I think people struggle with this a little bit because, number one, they don't want to seem that weak. And number two, perhaps it's a pride thing. They don't really want to talk about their shortcomings. And I agree with that. So what they want to see, your interviewer wants to check your shortcomings. He wants to see whether you are self-aware, and that's very important. You're not coming across as an arrogant student who've just come out of the best university in Japan or in China, and therefore you have this attitude of superiority. They don't want to see that, okay? They want to see that you're going to be able to mingle well with their employees and be able to contribute actively as a team. Now, there are three ways of approaching this. First way is to admit nothing. So you can say something like, I've reviewed the requirements of this role and I'm confident that my past experiences and skills will allow me to deliver from day one and I can hit the ground running. Now, not everybody has this level of confidence in admitting nothing. And if you are a fresher, that would seem very arrogant. So this is probably more for someone who has already got some work experience and can then use that work experience as part of the justification in why he made this statement. The second approach can be about your past improvement, So you can say something like, I didn't know how to delegate. Before I tended to do everything by myself. And after a while, I found that I was not only lonely, but I was burnt out. So I began to, engage more team members to work with me. And not only did it become a very inclusive type of bonding, but we increased productivity. So, at the end of the day, I do feel that teamwork is a critical skill set that I've learned from that project. So please note that when you talk about this weakness, it must not be essential to the job. So if you're going to say, if you're applying for customer service and it requires a language skill, don't say that I don't know how to speak this language. Then that would really kill any interest, no matter how much you try to salvage yourself. So try to pick on a weakness that is not critical to that job, all right? The third approach could be about talking about the future. Talk about, and this is very helpful for freshies, for those who've just graduated. Talk about learning and developing. So you can say that I noticed that there's a lot of online design experience needed in marketing today. So I've pursued a course in coding over the summer. I've applied it to some of my internships, and during one of my internships, I ran this particular project, and I used my coding to speed up that project. And this knowledge, I hope to apply to your company as well, right? So the weakness question. The third question, which is very, very common, is about why should we hire you? And basically, companies want to know that they are going to have a return on investment. Can you do the job? Can you do it well? And do I like this person? So again, make sure you relate it to the job description and bring achievements that are related to that job description that they've posted. And state your interests. Something like, I wish to grow with the company and develop new skills. I know that Rolls-Royce or P&G would be the right company to join in order for me to develop these new skills and contribute to an exciting new era. What they want to see is competence. They want to see that you're conscientious and that you are a friendly person. That when you explain about your interests and your passion, you're not just a boring person who tells them like this in a monotone voice. Yep, you are engaging with them. You're having this passion that comes through in the way you relate to your interviewer. Okay? All right, next slide. I wish you all the best, really, in your pursuit for a new career, job change, etc. I do help freshers with critiquing their resumes if they want to. Few things that I do here, I've just listed them down just for your info only. All right, my coordinates, I do have one last final slide. So you can find me on these platforms, and please go through by Xian. I think they're probably your first point of contact, and they'll probably direct you as necessary. Okay? It's not just me that they talk to. There are tons of other people. So thank you for your time today, and I hope I haven't dragged this on for too long. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Lelia. Yeah, for all the insights and strategies, and hopefully these are ones that you can apply for your own aspirations. And I think we'll now move on to the Q&A.
Emmy, do you want to share with us tonight about your job hunting experience?
Yeah, would you like to share first?
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, my name is Emmy. I from cohort 2023 and I graduated from Shanghai Jiaotong Universities last summer in June. And I did master in international business there. And as for my job hunting experience, the Baixans my network community has helped me a lot, where I connected with an alum and I could land my first ever internship in Shanghai through the network without speaking Mandarin, which is almost an impossible task. I really appreciate that as well. And after my internship at Bosch that I got through my network, I did my internship at TripLink, which is a bank of trip.com. And post-graduation, I could secure a job within the expert network firm in Hong Kong. But also, I recently quit my job in January, and I'm looking to transitions into events plannings, preferably within the Asia Pacific as well. And throughout my job hunting experience, I realized that looking at language barrier, my advantage in speaking Thai and English and understanding intercultural context through my experiences with Baixans have helped me a lot, and which I really appreciate. So thank you. And I do have a question for you as well, Lelia. Since I was previously intern as a product management intern and also as product operations interns, most of my internship experience does involve more in the sense of client-facing role, which is not much related to event planning. How should I tailor my resume to fit with that?
Oh, in events planning, there's always a salesperson. The fact that you have customer or client fronting roles in the past will position you very nicely for the sales functions within events planning. So you're not limited to just back end and setting up booths, but you're also engaging with clients to interest them in that conference or that event, that exhibition. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. I think that's the only questions I have for now.
Sure. So are we moving on to the Q&A at this point in time? Do we want to
we are in a Q&A session right now. So if anybody has any more bearing questions or any questions that haven't been answered yet, then now's a chance to ask Lelia right here while she's still here.
Yeah, I do have questions that were raised in the document that you sent me. So it's also for those who are applying as foreigners. I'd like to address that because it's always not so easy. So there was one question on how to get jobs in Hong Kong for non-Cantonese speakers. Another question on what Japanese companies are looking for when they hire international students. There was another question on US geopolitics on job hunting for internationals. Is consulting still a good stepping stone? What research corporate jobs are there for someone who wants to go into academia? And then we had other questions around what is her outlook on the job market in East Asia? Any tips on breaking into new unfamiliar industries? So if you are on this webinar, please just show me that some of these questions are yours, and I'll try to answer them. Okay, so let's tackle that. How to get jobs in Hong Kong for non-Cantonese speakers, and how do I go about applying for a job as a foreigner? I'd like to know more about employment after graduation in job hunting as a foreigner. So yes, it's not going to be easy, but the fact that you have graduated from a university in that country already holds you in good stead. That's number one. So if you have if say you are a foreigner in a Japanese university right now, and you want to stay on to work in Japan, and you have done 4 years there, you've got a good degree of sorts and relevant degree that you could use, then by all means, I did share with you some of the job platforms just now, where it is both for locals and for international students, for international or foreign applicants. So companies, especially if they're multinationals, are quite open to international students. And if they've already been studying in Japan and have some knowledge of, first of all, the language, and secondly, the cultural nuances within Japan, then they do welcome that sense of East-West and including them in their considerations. There are also certain barriers that are unspoken. You need to be aware of that. So, for example, there's certain barriers on age that you need to be aware of, or on gender you need to be aware of. So you have to be smart in terms of how you identify industries and jobs that could fit your need as a foreigner. Yeah. If you want a job in Hong Kong and you can't speak Cantonese, there are jobs that are bilingual. So, for example, the preponderance of jobs in teaching, for example, if you're teaching English, you may not need Cantonese as your alternate language in Hong Kong. Of course, if you are, say, for example, in an environment where you're going to need both, like customer service. In customer service, you may need both the local language knowledge as well as a foreign language knowledge. Then you will need to pick up the local language. There's no running away from it. So it's very job dependent. And also, I would encourage you to do a little bit more homework around the industries you apply to as to how you could fit as a foreigner. But as a foreigner, try to target multinational companies. That would be your first focus. All right. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I could go through some of these questions that were raised also on how to bring up unique skills and characteristics. Are there any more questions? Please don't feel shy. Please, I'm not going to bite you through the screen. So please.
Oh, Lelia, Xian has a question in the chat.
Okay, thank you. What do I do? What do I do to find what? Sorry, could I see that again, if you don't mind seeing what that chat was?
Oh, if you haven't,
I
What
think
do
he
I?
would like to ask. Yeah.
What I do find challenging in most recruitment processes are the aptitude tests. Would you have any advice on how to navigate those tests, or perhaps how to better prepare for those tests? No, I'm afraid I don't have tips for that. Personally, I'm not a fan of such tests because I feel they do not represent me accurately as a candidate. And yeah, neither do I. I do feel that they're very biased, and usually people tend to focus on the negatives much more than the positives. But in a lot of cases now, it's become a first screen. So just do your best. What you can't run away from are the numeric tests, and I suggest that you actually find online. There are lots of examples online where you can do numeric tests that are related to psychological tests. So do check that out online. And you can practice that before you do a live one with the company. But aptitude test is just going to be very hard for me to navigate or to help you with that. That is truly difficult. And I know the Korn Ferry one, it does tend to be case study driven, and it wants to see how you respond. There's no right or wrong to these things, so don't be afraid. All right, this is not meant to in any way kill your chances, but it just wants to see where you are leaning towards in terms of propensity. So if you are leaning towards someone very analytical, they may put you in, say, a different category or different opportunity than someone who is, say, more broad-based knowledge and wants to do sales and marketing. Okay? So don't feel afraid. There's no right and wrong. And I can't give you tips on how to pass this aptitude test. But for numeric tests, definitely you can go online to find tests that you can try out first. I asked about the question regarding whether consulting is still good springboard. Okay, the consulting world is under tremendous pressure at the moment. It used to be a great paymaster, but in this last year and a half, it has shrunk its workforce by almost half over time, of course, not immediately, but over time. So I do not personally believe consulting is the right springboard for a new freshman. But yeah, try something else to start with. You can always go into consulting later. If you are from one of the Ivy League schools, they do have a preference for that. So I know BCG, McKinsey tend to pick people from Ivy Leagues. They do have a preference for certain types of graduates. If you feel you're of that caliber, please go ahead, put in your application. You lose nothing anyway by trying. All right. I do have another question.
Dane also had a question. She raised her hand.
Yeah, please ask.
Hi,
Hi.
Lelia. I have a question. I already have a job, right? But I'm looking to apply for other jobs. So when I'm preparing for my CV, how do I leverage, using AI technology? I don't use AI. I'm kind of old-fashioned, but I feel like if I put in my CV, a computer's just gonna read it. So how do I, set myself? Because it's like two computers just talking to each other, right? It feels like an job application
Yeah.
feels like that. So how do we set ourselves apart? Like,
Yeah,
do we,
I agree.
I would appreciate some advice.
I agree. Yeah, I know AI is used a lot. So even if you apply on LinkedIn, there's actually a feature that is AI driven that says, "Shall we design your resume for this position?" So do use it. That's LinkedIn actually has this feature where its AI does help you design a resume that fits the requirements of the job that you're applying for. So use that AI function, download it, make it pretty, personalize it to yourself, add in or subtract things that you feel are necessary or not necessary. Use it as a first base for you to cater to that particular job description. Now, I will tell you that typically LinkedIn gives you very, very low success rates. And likewise for a lot of these online platforms, and that's because HR and the recruiter is inundated with resumes, inundated. So sometimes it's helpful not just to apply online, but also to write into that company. Unless, of course, they don't let you know which company is involved here. But for those positions where the company information is provided, write in also to the company with your resume. Not just depend on submitting it on AI or online. Okay? Dane, does that help? Yeah. And of
Thank
course, if you have connections of someone who works in that company, all the better. Milk it, get that person to introduce you to the right person so that you can get your resume in front of the stakeholder or the decision maker. All right? Okay. Other questions? Interested in
Yeah, William has a question. She raised her hand.
Okay, hi Lilia. Sorry,
Hi,
I cannot
Brilliant.
turn off I cannot turn on my camera, but thank you so much for the insights. I'm Berlin. I am Xian scholars in this cohort 2025.
Mhm.
So I'm currently studying my master's degree in Chinese politics foreign policy in China in Tsinghua University. I'm 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 always wondering, like I feel like for me personally, I'm always like in between these uh two fields of industry. The first thing is academia, which is like very heavy on like research and everything. But at the same time, outside academia, I'm always very active towards like working with like, if there's any student organization, I join and I go to embassies, consulates, and so on. So like those practical stuff. And then I'm always confused and torn between these two, like bridging between academia or like going on for the practical side of at the end of the day. But at the same time, I could not see myself like pursuing either one of these in the long run. I don't know if I'm being greedy or at the same time, but at the same time, I noticed that if these two intersections can be combined, I think that will be the best for me. So like in the meantime, I'm still like looking around whether or not like later on whether when I'm trying to find internships or like graduate, should I apply for consulting or if there's anything in mind you could share, like if there's any people that have like this concerns as well, bridging between these two worlds as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. I'm not quite clear about what your second interest is. You said embassies and
Yeah,
chambers of
basically like
commerce?
government relations.
Oh, government relations. Okay, all right. Academia and government relations. Uh-huh. Now, all right. Academia is obviously a very, very specific route. And I do believe that that could be enriching at so many levels. If you are the type that enjoys discovering new ideas, new concepts, testing those concepts, being able to reach a group of similar-minded people in order to translate those concepts into reality. Government relations is a generic skill that could come from that comes from experience and also knowledge of the industry that you're in. So, for example, government relations in Indonesia, in the seed industry, for example, is a very important function because in today's environment, the government and the political environment in Indonesia requires a larger focus on getting skills embedded in its own local companies. And thus, they have required, say, for example, more investments by foreign multinational companies to include local companies in their ambitions in Indonesia. So then government relations steps in to manage the advocacy work with that government in order to propose how that industry could move forward and come to an agreement where both sides still have some form of a win-win situation. Government relations is almost like grease to friction, and it's an important component to how businesses are run in international or foreign countries. But it's not a skill that you can just learn in school. So you'd have to have experience. You'd have to immerse yourself in that industry or that topic or that focus, and be able to speak up for that agenda. So whether the two worlds could meet, yeah, possibly. So, for example, if you were a microbiologist in plant seeds, and you felt that, your knowledge, your technical knowledge of seeds and germplasm, for example, could be applicable in winning over a government's winning over, say, a certain agenda that a government has put forward in a country, you could then be the voice of reason as a government relations officer. So It does mean, however, that you do have industry experience and not just conceptual experience. And academia tends to be very conceptual, whereas government relations is really about the practicality of that concept on the ground with the people in that industry. So you'd have to make a particular effort moving at some point from academia into industry and applying those concepts and knowledge that you've picked up. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
So I've
Thank
given
you
you an
so much for the
example.
input.
Yeah, I've given you an example of the seed industry, the ag business. Yeah, anyway.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lilia. I think unfortunately we're out of time for any more questions. I think. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lilia, for sharing your valuable insights.